Welcome to the Ground Investigation Podcast. Today we're joined by Hannah Thomas, a geological and geotechnical expert with an impressive career spanning everything from managing subsurface investigations to opening new offices and growing businesses. She's passionate about everything engineering. Social media, and helping people explore their opportunities to find what truly fulfills them. We're excited to dive into her story and hear her insights. Let's get started. Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Super glad to be here.
Excellent. Okay, so I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your journey into the geological and geotechnical engineering. What sparked your interest in the field?
Yeah, it's a great question to start. So, going to the Colorado School of Mines, I came in as biochemical engineering and had no idea what I wanted to do. I took biology. Turns out that wasn't for me. And that kind of pushed me towards the earth science side because that it was either biology or earth sciences. And I ended up doing a summer kind of internship working with mines. They have this summer program for high schoolers where they let you kind of run the same programs that you do as a college student, where you get to design these different engineering projects. And the professor I worked for and with was a geological engineer that taught their science class actually, and I hadn't had her. So I got really close to her. She kind of told me more and more about what she did and how she mapped on beaches and got paid for it. And up until that point, I had never even heard that that was a thing. So it kind of sparked my interest, of course, because everybody wants to map on a beach for money. But that's kind of what started my path that direction, was hearing from her and her stories and seeing how badass she was really, and just wanting to be like her. So after that, the next fall, I started taking all of the geology classes, and I really never looked back after that. I think that was when I kind of realized that that was the major I wanted to do. So I think that's kind of what sparked my interest, was just being around somebody who had been in the industry before.
Sure. So having someone to kind of look up to, and I suppose
Hmm.
exposure to someone that actually doing it, because there's not that many of us, I suppose, in the world. So in terms of the
No.
geotechnical engineering, um, so yeah, it certainly helps. If you're not exposed, then how would you ever know that you want to do that? So you mentioned about geological and geotechnical engineering. Can you just kind
Mhm.
of summarize the difference?
Yeah, so they're used interchangeably, I feel like, for the most part. But if you're looking specifically, geological engineering is more, rock geology, hard rock, rock mechanics. Geotechnical is more soil, soil mechanics. In my head, that's a pretty big difference. But in the end, either way, if you're doing geotech or geological, they all kind of tie in together, because if there's soil on top of rock, then you're going to be dealing with both. And a lot of the time, that rock erodes into soil or it's transported. So if you can understand that geological side to it, I think it helps understand the geotechnical side, because they're all kind of connected, big picture, but can kind of be used interchangeably when people are asking what kind of engineer I am, because I've done both, but I definitely have a preference towards one side more than the other.
Sure, okay. And you mentioned about Colorado School of Mines. What was the one key lesson or experience from your time there that stayed with you throughout your career?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love answering. Biggest thing while I was there was learning to really put yourself out there and try everything. And I'll tell everybody this, because I think I even have regrets of not trying more than I already did. And I, worked on a political campaign. I was that summer intern teacher. I was a football filmer. I worked for the gym. I think it's really important for you to do that as early as you can, to learn more about yourself, what makes you tick, what makes you not tick, things that you hate, the things that you love, and kind of try to channel that into more of the direction that you're going. So that if you can explore that on the front end, even if you're working in retail, anything like that is going to teach you something about yourself that you're not going to know otherwise. And I think a lot of people go into college, super young. Like, I was 18, I didn't know myself by then. And I don't know any better. And my dad was a lawyer. So, that's really all that I had seen growing up. And I think, while you're young, and even if you're older, there's life is short and there's always enough time to try something new. But I would really say the biggest thing was learning to just try new things and to not be afraid of being new to it or being green to it, because that's just a new opportunity to learn something about yourself. So,
That's great
yeah.
advice. To try everything, especially when you're young,
Mhm.
just try everything
But
because
even
how do you
now,
know? Yeah, yeah.
exactly. And I think that's, what a lot of people end up in that midlife crisis because they never allowed themselves to
Hmm.
explore. They more did things because they thought that they should do them, or because their parents did them, or because someone told them to do that. And I
Yeah.
think they get, 50 years in and they're not living for themselves. They're living this life that someone else wanted for them. So
Hmm.
I think that's why I say to do it early on if you can, but it's never too late to have that
Sure.
attitude, I think.
It's hard to know, and it's like things you don't realize you haven't experienced at that point, and until you do, you just can't make that decision.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
a lot of the time you're gonna find things you don't like before you
yeah,
find something that you do like, and you can't
yeah.
be discouraged by that.
No, that's equally as important, isn't it? Because if you have a line and like, right, I don't like doing this, I do like doing
Hmm.
this. Oh, okay, I'll go down that route and see how I can make a living, I
Exactly. And I
suppose.
think that's been my first 5 years out of school was, hey, how do I
Yeah.
do that? How do I figure out where I fit into this? Because I did
Hmm.
IT internships during school. I didn't do, geology related ones, but that's because
Yeah.
I loved video games. I loved, troubleshooting in IT before I'd even gone into that route. And I wanted to see if that was something that really piqued that same interest that I thought I had in it, and it didn't. So
Hmm.
that's why I think really it's important to spend your first couple years figuring that out.
Yeah, no, 100%. Totally agree with that.
Struggling to find top geotechnical and geoenvironmental talent? You could use a generalist recruiter, or you could use a specialist. At Geo Expert Search, we place experts where they belong. Across the UK, USA, Australia, and New Zealand. No highways, no bridges, no structures. Just geotechnical and geoenvironmental. Now and forever. Geo Expert Search. Finding the right people for the right roles with no wasted time. Visit geoexpertsearch.com to learn more.
So you said, actually not really geotechnical, geoenvironmental related, but you said about the political campaign. What was that about? That sounds interesting. Can you tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about that?
It was my naive little self thinking that that might be something I want to do. But I was in school and working, retail at the same time. I had to pay for school, so I needed to have a job. And I had three at one point. The political campaign was one of those. And I had always been super into politics, like knew all the candidates, knew everybody on that one side that I came from. But it was really just to see if that, since my dad was a lawyer, see if that kind of side piqued my interest. And it didn't. And it was horrible. But it really, like, I don't think I was really out of my shell at that point. And I have to knock on 1,000 random doors of people who don't want to hear from you. It really forces you out of your shell and kind of forced me to be a little bit more outgoing because I've fall back on being the shy, typical engineering type. But that really forced me to come out of my shell, just be sure of who I was, and really just learn to be a conversationalist and to, be able to talk one on one with really anybody. Because when you're knocking on somebody's door, you have no idea what's on the other side. It might not be somebody you agree with, it could be someone you agree with, but either way, you're going to have to talk to them. So I think it was really important for me to do a job like that, to kind of open the creative, the social skills side of me, because I think when you're stuck on the technical side, you don't really get much of that customer service or social interactions that can really help, I think, in the technical world, that we're missing a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's definitely throwing yourself right into the fire, isn't it? Because I suppose you knock on someone's door, they're of the other party and seriously dislike the candidate, which you're trying to, I suppose, sell. Which is
Exactly.
it's not
Hmm.
even trying to sell something that they might need. It's you've
Exactly.
came to
And
me.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, nobody wants to see a solicitor, even if you're not selling anything, you're still selling the concept, the idea. And it kind of made me get used to rejection a lot sooner than
Yeah.
I would have otherwise, because I had
Yeah.
doors closed in my face. I had people, disagreeing with me. And you kind of just have to learn to go with the flow, roll with the punches, and show up as yourself every door you knock on. And
Hmm.
that was it. And it showed me I didn't want to do politics, but
Yeah.
also taught me that I am good at conversations and I can do that,
Yeah.
and conflict resolution too. I think that was all really important for me to learn about myself, and then to also learn I don't really love cold calling or,
Mm.
something like that. I don't mind knocking on doors, but cold calling, people don't want to hear from you. They can't see your face. They can't, get that energy from your aura. So I feel like that's just way
Yeah.
harder. But again, that was an experience that without that, I would have probably ended up on a very different path and way less
Hmm.
social. That like definitely forced me, because you have no other choice but to just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good training anyway. Resilience building, cold. I mean, I do some cold calls with the recruitment side of things, and yeah, that can be quite brutal, and it definitely makes you second
Yeah.
guess yourself.
Takes a special type of person to like to do
Yeah.
that, but I don't mind the cold meeting and the cold knocking, but it's the cold calling that it's just this
Hmm.
other level of disconnect that I have a hard time with. But
Yeah.
that's just something again that, like, yes, I learned that I don't like doing that, but I also learned if I have to do it in the future, I'm just gonna have to probably try a little bit harder than somebody else who's a little more natural at it. So
Yeah. Well, you do some. We're going off track slightly here, but you do some business development, and you've done business development through your
mhm.
current company and a previous company as well. So yeah, I mean, it has to be done, otherwise, all the companies will close the doors eventually.
Yeah, totally. And I think with sales, depending on the market that you're in, if it's, business to business, if you're just selling a product, if it's, it kind of depends on just the business that you're in, and the way that you need to advertise. And I think that cold calling and that sort of kind of way of messaging is quickly becoming more and more obsolete, because back in the day, at first it was people knocking on doors. That's all we had before technology was a thing. So you had to decide on the spot, yes or no, if you wanted this product, and you couldn't go research it or go look it up to see if you actually did want it. You had to decide right then and there, or you weren't going to get the opportunity again. And now with technology, like we have progressed to the phone, and then now we've progressed to like social media and email and all that. And I think, now that we have access to the internet and access to all that information about these products, like you don't need to be shoving it down people's throats as much, because if they do want that product, then they'll say so, or they'll go look for it or whatever. But for me, it's about becoming, the industry, the product expert, letting the world know that you are. And then when they have that problem, they know who to call, because they've seen you being the expert without, kind of pushing it down their throat, because they'll decide if they need something or not. And I think that's kind of the new day and age of sales, is finding a way to mix, the old cold calling and all that into social media and email and going to conferences. I think it's a combination of everything that really helps, kind of put your nets out there in a way that's not exhausting.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's a book, I spoke about this for the last guest actually, um, called A Key Person of Influence, which sounds kind of what you would do there. You want to be the person known for what you want to be known for, essentially. So it's a Key Person of Influence book by
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Priestley, which is exactly that. So yeah, I would get that and have a read. It's quite an interesting book. Right.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
It's a good. He may be coming on a podcast, so
Oh,
I'm really interested for him to come on in the new year. He said he will.
yeah.
We'll see. We'll see.
Sweet. I'd listen to that.
Right. So you've experienced both the contracting and consultant sides of geotechnical engineering. How do they differ, and what have you learned from working on both sides?
Yeah, another great question. I think it also depends on the companies that you're working for, between the contracting and the consulting. But um, right out of school, I worked for Kiewit, which is huge contractor. Everybody knows out here, the big yellow Kiewit. And they sent me to Louisiana right away. So bit of a wake up call for me to have to pick up and move. But having started in the contracting world, I didn't really know what the consulting world was like. I guess in school, they kind of showed us how you'd be tracking hours, by each project and doing investigations and stuff. I went into contracting just because Kiewit had a table at the Mines Career Fair, and someone came and talked to our class, and she had been to mine, or she had went to Mines and graduated and then went to work for Kiewit and had been working for them for years. So I was super inspired by that. That's why I went into contracting, because I was like, that's super cool. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then they moved me to Louisiana for about a year to do concrete driven piles there and manage the subs doing cofferdams. And then I kind of thought, oh, I haven't done any consulting yet. Like, I feel like I went to school for that and I'm an engineer, so I should at least explore that before saying that contracting is the way that I want to go. So I went to Stantec for almost 3 years and did a lot more design, like modeling, subsurface investigation planning, logging, reports, like baseline reports, data reports, mapping, geological mapping too. So very different than the contracting side. I was doing, again, like a lot more design, and the field work was just different. It wasn't managing people. It wasn't keeping track of progress, really. It was more, doing the model or coming up with the calculations, or, designing the subsurface investigation and getting the subs and all that. So it, even now, having worked for Braun too, another consultant, where it was construction materials testing instead of just the geotech. It's tough to say, like, just in a short sentence, how different they are. But for me, I feel like contracting just works with my skills better because it's a lot more management and kind of organization coordination. Um, and I am better at that than sitting at a desk and just cranking out calcs, or, doing a model for 3 to 6 months. That was more what my life looked like at a consultant than, at a contractor, where I'm just having to understand the drawings and make sure that the crew understands them and make sure they have the materials. And, you know, really the only commonality I have between all of them is doing like the estimation or the proposals for them. And I think the biggest difference there is that contracting is literally way more about contracts than consulting was about. You need to make sure you read this contract like it's your Bible, because that's what dictates everything in this project. But in consulting, it was more like, here's the same template we've used, over and over again. So there's not much thought going into the contracts part. It's just like that's settled at the beginning and then you kind of just go with it. But with contracting, yeah, it's understanding the contract and the legal side of it too, and the safety side of it. There's just so much more that goes into it that I enjoy, and I think I like juggling a million things at once. And contracting is a little bit more like that, and it's either everything's on fire or nothing is on fire. And I thrive in that kind of environment because I love going and going and going, resting, and then kind of going through that again. But consulting, it felt like, you're going with billable work. You have to be billable. You have to have above 80%. So things just look different there. I think you just always have to be busy. And for me, I hated having to keep track of my time by each 30 minutes to an hour, because I understand that that's how you bill and that's how consulting works. Like, it's not going to change. But it just doesn't really fit well with my style. Just being someone with pretty bad ADHD and liking to jump around a little bit, it helps me just be able to focus on the task that I'm doing instead of having to keep track of everything every day, because it's just another thing to think about, I guess. So that's the biggest differences in my mind. It's pretty night and day on consulting versus contracting, but really just depends on who you are and your skills and what you enjoy. Because I've known people who have gone from consulting to contracting and went right back to consulting, and then I kind of did the opposite and ended up back in contracting. But again, you have to try to know if it's for you or not.
I find the most like the candidates that I would deal with myself. I think it's industry wide, to be honest. Most go from contracting to consultancy as opposed to the other way around. Um, I
Slower
think contract,
pace, I feel like that way to go
yeah,
faster pace to slower pace.
yeah. I think yeah, I think it's generally that route because contracting here generally it's harsher. You maybe more project management, more hours than the consultancy. However, being the consultant, it depends on the company and what projects you have. But when I first started as a contractor, um, but I spent like the first 3 months in the office, and that is just not good. I did not like sitting in an office all the time. Then I went out
Yeah,
on site, and it's much better. It's far
yeah.
superior to
That's
being
the
stuck in
thing.
the
Like, you have to do that to know. And I went from being in the field in Louisiana in a trailer, in the field 75% of the time to COVID times of working at this desk day in, day out for almost 3 years. And for me, I was like, that's when I found I had ADHD because I couldn't sit still. I couldn't sit at a desk. It was driving me like literally insane. And turns out it was like a combination of me just having all this excess energy, but also just going from a job where I thrived and being out around people and crews and having a crew to just being in my corner doing my calculations and my models by myself for like years. It's just this very stark difference that can really give people insight on what's meant for them, what's right for them, you know.
You mentioned ADHD. Does that not inhibit your organization skills to a point?
I think it's actually given me a superpower a little bit because most of my life I didn't have medication. It was only like a couple years ago that I had it, so it made me like extra organized to keep up with everybody. So I think, now I have these methods that I've created over the years that work for me to stay on top of things, but I also now have medication that just puts me even higher. So I think it actually is a little bit of a superpower to um, my brain naturally likes to juggle things and it likes to be more of a manager than okay, you have to sit on this one task for 6 days and only work on this one task and don't talk to anybody. That's like just my nightmare pretty much. So I think, yeah, it's a superpower, but also if it's used wrong, then it can really burn you out.
For me, I think I have a little bit ADHD, but for me, it
Hmm.
rather manifests as there's sitting down, which I can't do for a long periods of time, which is a nightmare because my job is now sitting down looking at a computer
Yeah.
screen.
Hmm.
But the organizational things, if I've got say 3 or 4 interviews to arrange, which is not a hard task, it's not intellectually challenging whatsoever. For some reason, it just feels beyond me. I can get there eventually, but then I realise I've done that an hour late, and like
Yeah.
I said to myself, don't get any of this wrong, and I've just somehow managed to book one of the interviews an hour earlier. So for
Yeah.
me, the organisational stuff is a real hardship.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not hard. It's more just like you come up with your own little tricks. And I think if you were to look at the way that I organize things, you might think that they might not seem organized, but to me, I'm like, I know exactly where they are. I know where to look. I know that it's gonna be where it needs to be and gonna be where, like, when I go to look for it, it's gonna be where I want it to be. But I think it's something you kind of have to admit as yes, it's going to look different than somebody who doesn't have ADHD. But again, you kind of come up with your own ways. And for me, it's making sure I write down notes, but I don't carry around like an assignment notebook or anything like that. It's kind of just all up in my head. But definitely drop some balls here and there.
Yeah, I
So
was going to say, keeping it in
not
your head
perfect.
never really works out
Hmm.
well for me, to be honest. I have to write it
Hmm.
down.
Now, and
But
as
then
I, yeah, as I get older, OneNote has become my favorite thing to use because all
yeah,
of any project I'm on or any proposal, you just start putting your thoughts there and then it's always going to be there. It's not like in a million different Word documents or just one journal that you
yes.
leave at
Well,
home.
that's my next problem. I'll have some paper and I'll
Hmm.
start one here and then I'll go right. Well, let's go a new subject. So I'll start a couple of
Yeah.
pages in, And then
Yep,
where's it gone?
exactly.
Apologies, I don't know
Yep.
what I'm talking
That's
about.
that's how I used to be too. It's why you got to go digital, because digital, it'll all
Yeah,
be in one place at least.
yeah, much easier thing. Anything that takes out my brain, I think, is useful. Okay, so how did you approach helping establish Braun Intertex Corporation, Corporation's new Colorado office? What challenge did you face in the business development and technical side?
Yeah, so that was definitely a tough experience for me. That was my job before the one that I'm at now. I started last February, 2 Februarys ago, I think. But they had been around for about 2 years already. They just hadn't had really an established office. So they brought an office over here because they had two projects that they had been working on and had planned to keep working on. They didn't want to have to truck people back and forth between Minnesota and North Dakota and Colorado. Um, so big part of my job was just brand awareness because not a lot of people knew that they existed. They're from, like I said, Minnesota, North Dakota, and have green everything. So, when you see them, that's Braun. But out here, nobody really knew that they existed. I didn't know that they existed until I tried to sell them software for borehole logging. And so once I started to work for them, it was just a matter of kind of downloading all the information, trying to get just ahead of understanding what they do. The geotech side was easy for me, but construction materials side was like a new side to geotech for me. So I really just spent my first couple months trying to learn as much as I could, go out with other techs and watch what they're doing, concrete testing, all that. And once I got, more and more of the hang of it, I was able to start showing what I was doing on LinkedIn and, posting pictures of me doing it or, yeah, just mostly pictures of me doing it and explaining, okay, this is what I'm doing in this picture, just so that you understand. And in a way, it was, kind of killing two birds with one stone of getting more brand awareness on LinkedIn and also letting people know that we do those services without it being, again, it's kind of shoved down your throat. It's more like, hey, I'm doing this, you see me doing it, and the next time you need your floor flatness or you need your concrete tested, like who to call. So really my biggest job where I was there was trying to do all of that at once and try to balance, learning the technical side, doing the technical work of concrete testing, density testing, um, but also being able to showcase that in a way that just brought brand awareness about and also help people trust me as an expert. And I think every time I go to a new either industry or new company like this, I really think it's important to get your feet wet, your boots dirty, your hands dirty before you start trying to tell other people about what you're doing because you need that credibility and you need that trust. And I am not the kind of person that wants to sell out or act that I know something that I don't. So I think for that, it was really for Braun, it was really just trying to focus on doing a little bit of everything so that I could get the work done, also showcase what we were doing, and then also, meet with new clients and people off LinkedIn to start making those relationships because Braun was 2 years in at Colorado, but like most of the, majority of the geotech CMT companies had been there for 30 years. So you were up against people who have been here forever that have, are part of the, um, just the club, basically. It's like you kind of have to uh, earn your stripes a little bit and spend a little time here before people start trusting you because soils out here look a lot different than the soils up north. And they want to know that they can trust you and that you actually know what you're doing out here. And it's not just that you're from another state, just trying to act like So I think, yeah, in the end, it was really just that balance of trying to make sure I understood while also showcasing what we were doing to get more work and to keep getting the same work we already had and to keep the clients we already had. So Yeah.
Sure. Okay. And in terms of, I see that you're an ambassador for the Association of Environmental and Engineering Geologists. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, so I was an AEG during school for a couple years. I really love geology, so it's the Association of Environmental Geologists and Engineering Geologists. And they reached out about an opportunity to be a brand ambassador just because I had been in AEG before, and they're trying to kind of revamp their social media. So I agreed to be a brand ambassador for them. That means just reposting anything that they post, going to the conference, the annual conference, and posting about that. Trying to go to the um, local meetings and posting about that. Just really trying to spread awareness for people to join because a lot of people join in college, but then they kind of lose touch and they don't think to join it after college. But it's actually a really, really great way and a place to meet like-minded people, and you'll end up seeing a bunch of your classmates and your old professors that way, which I think is super super helpful for my career now, and not only showcasing them and getting more awareness for them, but also helping myself and getting more connected in the geology world because that's where my passion lies. So that was really a big reason why I did that. Is because I have a huge passion for engineering geology, and usually find that my people are the geologists that we all just get along, we all have the same values, just get excited about the same things. um, so that's why I did that, and I kind of just do brand awareness as a whole for anybody that wants me to, but that one was an easy one just because I was already passionate about it.
So, how do you see the role of technology evolving in geotechnical engineering, especially in areas like slope stability, foundation engineering, and subsurface data management?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of technology. Modeling was probably one of my favorite things to do in engineering, so I've had a little experience in that. I think it's the future, and the future is now. It's already here. It's a tool that is super helpful for, figuring out designs that would have taken us, three times as long without. So I really think with AI and how that's developing, I think that the software that we already have is going to start trying to incorporate more and more of that, like machine learning and learning off behaviors and stuff. And I think that geo geotechnical as a whole has a lot of room to grow still because they're a little bit behind on the innovation and the technology side, I think, compared to like manufacturing and oil and gas. But for us, I think if we can continue to incorporate AI into the software that we already have, like Geo, Rock Studio, all that, or Geo Studio, Rock. I can't even remember all of them now. There's so many, but I think if we can keep admitting that innovation is important, then I think that we're going to keep seeing more and more technology incorporated into what we do. But there has to be champions pushing it because, having worked for like digital borehole logging, I've heard so many excuses from people of, us being able to do things already on paper, and why would we need to change that if it's working and it's worked. And that's a great point, but also those people have never tried the alternative, or at least even given it a chance. So I think that if people can start opening their mind a little bit to trying different processes, even if they don't work better, we have to at least try to get closer to that end goal. And if we don't do that, then I think we're going to end up, years behind the other industries that are using and incorporating AI. Um, and I would love to see it incorporated more into what we do with, drilling, and maybe seeing if there's a better way to do it without maybe, being so destructive. Like that's in my mind where we could go with technology, and trying to make it just better for the earth. And maybe that means using a software that can model something like that, something like CPTs. So I think we're on our way, but there's still so much that we could do, and it takes all of us having open minds, and not just, Gen Z or Alpha or whatever who were born on cell phones. Like, of course, they're going to be advocates for technology. We need people who are the older generations to be champions for it. And, maybe it's not comfortable for you, or, something new for you, but to me, that's exciting. And that's why I think technology, if you can combine that into geo, it's an amazing world that has so much potential that's not been tapped into yet, I think. And that's what's cool about Geo Week, I think, is that conference that shows all the new technologies, a survey, all of that, which is super, super important, I think, for us to keep getting closer to that. So
I think if companies that don't adopt technology, especially AI, in 30 years' time, 20 years' time, they won't exist.
you'll be too
Because
late.
there is a financial reason for doing these things, as well as the technology. How long do you think it will be before AI can almost completely replace a geotechnical engineer in terms of, calculations, report writing, that sort of thing?
I don't know if they'll ever completely replace. I think, like it's going to get close, but I think there's always going to need to be a geotech or an engineer making that
Yeah,
final call or that
reading
final
the
check.
final reports, I think.
Yeah, because I use ChatGPT, I use AI, and I ask it to do things, and I'm like, did you actually look at this? Because the answer you gave me is so wrong. Yeah, so it's like in my mind, there's always going to need that final check, but maybe there's going to be less and less of our input into it. So
Yeah, you want a human eye to cast over it, but eventually you won't need that, will you? It will just be a case of when we
yeah,
cast
at
our
that
eye
point, it's
over
going
it.
to take over the world. So
Well,
I think,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. So who
yeah.
knows what life will be like when it
Hmm.
gets to there? But I don't think. Well, you're
Me
right.
either.
Because I mean, I wrote a post the other day using ChatGPT, and it says put in a quote. It it created a quote from it was like our applied environmental geologists kind of network over here, and I thought that's a great quote. I said, can you reference it? And it just made it up. Why would you just make it up?
Yeah,
Oh,
I've
sorry,
heard of
should I
that.
search for one? Like, no, it's too late. You've just made it up. Why would you do that? Because if you post things, because we're in a kind of technical world, you post something that's incorrect on LinkedIn to some geotechnical engineers, you'll know about it within about 30 seconds.
That's the thing. That's why I don't trust it because I'm like, people will tell you when you're wrong, and there's only certain things that I'll trust it with. That most of the time, it's like, can you give me an idea so I know what idea not to use? Like, it's more of like giving me inspiration of what not to say than it is to actually give me stuff to say. So I don't have a lot of faith in it right now, but I do think it could be fine tuned to be better. It's just right now it's used by everybody, and I'm sure there's better AI systems that maybe don't make those same mistakes, but this has to be used correctly. So
It certainly does. It will be interesting. Who knows if it will happen?
yeah,
At the moment, we're already at a place. I suppose it depends on how we think, doesn't it? Because so many things happen you never thought would ever happen, as you're
yeah,
stuck in your mind at this point in time, and you can't foresee what's going to happen. Even just ChatGPT now, the stuff it can
yeah.
do.
I just take it day by day because, like, even when the internet came out, that was huge, and then
Yeah,
it
yeah,
takes a
yeah,
couple years, so you got
yeah,
to work
yeah,
out the bugs. Yeah.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. Okay, so geotechnical engineering requires fieldwork and office-based tasks like design and reporting, which is what we were discussing earlier on. How do you manage the balance in your own work?
Yeah, that's another good question. I think I've had different jobs that like my balance has definitely been worse than others of working way too much in the field and then having, no time in the office and then feeling like super burnt out. I think for me, having the balance of both of them was perfect. Of being able to go out, at least once a week, whether that be checking on a project or going and doing testing or logging or something like that, just to get something, out of the office. And then when I would have those days, it would make me miss the office. So then when I was in the office, I would appreciate it or I would miss the field. So I think it was figuring out a balance of that. And for me, it took a couple different positions to find one that worked for me. And I think my first consulting position where I was doing like first time logging and all that, I was only being sent out into the field like every 4 months because we mainly worked on really big projects. So they didn't have all of it all the time. It was just sporadic basically. So um, I would just get stuck in the office for, 4 months at a time. And I would go crazy by the end of it because I'm like, I need to get out. I need to have some sort of refreshed meaning for all of this because when I'm just doing Gantt or just, digitizing people's logs for 4 months, but I'm not actually getting out there to log, it drives me insane because I'm like, I should be out there. I should be doing this. I want to be the one doing it. So I think everybody has a different balance of what is good for them. But for me, it was figuring that out of, okay, this is too much in the field. This is not enough in the field. How do I find, that happy medium? Because at Kiewit, I was working 70, 80-hour weeks out in the field. And then Stantec, I was at my desk for 40 hours. So I've had, both sides. And I think, again, it's just being conscious and aware of how it makes you feel. And when you don't feel good, that's important to notice. And if you want more field work, you got to hope that you're in a place that will listen to you. Because I think, Stantec is very good about if you wanted more field work, they would give it to you, but it might mean you're just away from home somewhere else. It's just, yeah, it's really having to advocate for yourself to be like, this is either too much or it's not enough. And another important thing to remember with balance is a lot of the time you don't get a say of what that balance looks like until you're like 5 or 6 years in, and you don't have to be out in the field as much because now you're reviewing logs and you're doing the reports and you're checking them. You're not actually doing the logging yourself. So it took me a little bit to realize that I needed to just pay my dues at the beginning and spend as much time as I could out in the field because every senior person I worked for after that would always talk about, how much they missed it, or when they did go into the field, they were so excited about it. So to me, I was like, okay, that means I need to appreciate this now because it's going to be less and less as you climb the ladder and you move up in positions, you'll be out less. So really it's that attitude and mindset of even if it's tough at the beginning, just knowing that it's not always going to be that way.
Sure, definitely. So you've worked on social media campaigns throughout your career. How can social media help geotechnical and geological engineers professionally?
I'm very passionate about this one. I don't think people realize how helpful it can be for your network, like your jobs, if you need another job, if you're trying to sell something, even if you're trying to make friends or reconnect with your classmates or your old professors. It's basically like a Rolodex that people used to carry around of the people that they've worked with or the people that they've met over time, and they, try to add them to that so that they have them as a contact. LinkedIn is basically that, but it's digital. So every person that you meet, every person that you work with or work for is a contact that you can add on there that may not come in handy right away, but eventually might. And even if they don't, that's still a good contact to have if it's a friend, a colleague, whatever. So for me, I tell everybody who is in high school to start then, college to start then, at least make a profile so that it's there. If people meet you and they do want to connect with you, at least they can find you. But I also say if you're going to conferences, if you're going to, different fairs, like take pictures of that, get into the habit of just showcasing what you're already doing. If you're already going to be there, showcase what you're already doing. And then it's killing two birds with one stone, basically. So I think for young and for, people who are further into their careers, it's never too late to start on that and to add the network that you already have. I don't think everybody needs to be an influencer on there. I don't think anyone or everybody needs to post every day. I think that's only if you want to do that, but at least add the people you already know, because again, you never know if you're out of a job and Billy that you connected with 6 years ago owns his own company now and is looking for somebody exactly like you. You never know if something like that's going to happen. And I've had, health issues come up to where I had to look for a new job. And I had, hundreds of people reaching out because they had already built up this network for 2 to 3 years of these people who didn't know me personally, but knew what I was capable of because of what I posted, and gave me this leg up and this way in that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And same with sales. I've gotten leads and I've gotten new clients from just posting about what we do. And so it gets you new business, it gets you new connections, and it also teaches you a lot too. Because for me, I look at people that I aspire to be like Shelby Yee, who has her own company, Rockmass. Like, you follow those people and you learn from them. You see how they post, what they post. You see what's important to them, what they value. And then you also follow people who get millions of likes, and you see what they do to get those likes. And even if they're in coaching and philosophy or something, you can still learn how that translates to your industry and put your own touch onto it that makes it authentic. Because that's the biggest thing, is that it has to be authentic and genuine, because people see right through that otherwise. And I think it's intimidating to put yourself out there, especially on social media. But there's so much that we're doing that people can learn from, especially in geotech and construction, that people don't even know what we do or what we do exists. And that's important for people younger than us to work in that industry. We need to showcase what we're doing. Because without knowing that one professor that I worked with randomly, I didn't even really know geotech or geological was a thing. So I think that social media and that kind of side of things can show brand awareness for multiple reasons, of your own brand, the industry brand, your company's brand. There's just a million possibilities on what you can do with it. And I've used it for a million different things at this point. Mostly for learning, though, about what we do, even learning about, I follow Jeff Winter, who is just the king of LinkedIn for manufacturing. So our worlds are like very, very different, but we still have so much to learn from each other just in social selling and social media. It really, the sky is the limit. So I try to tell everybody to at least have one. It doesn't mean you have to post every day, but start with one post. And if you don't get a lot of likes on that, like, that's the thing. People have to realize that Rome wasn't built in one day, and a following like that takes time.
Sometimes it's not as important to get the likes, although you always feel like it is.
Well, that's social media. Like, Instagram taught us all that that's what everything is based off of, which I hate, because I think it's no measure of your quality of content. A lot of the time it comes down to algorithms, and if someone wants to pay $60 to push their post to the top. So really, it's about, like I said, posting authentic, genuine content that you enjoy and what interests you, because people will see that and it's contagious. If you try to force things, like, it's not going to work out. And I feel like that's something I had to learn, is even at the beginning, I had to have all my siblings like things, because that automatically got me 4 likes. That means people are engaging. So it took, starting way back then and getting people I know to engage with my stuff to eventually snowball into having more of a following. So I always just want to tell people, like, don't be discouraged if you're not getting the same reactions that other people are getting, because it's not a competition, and your content, like, is very different, and you don't know what's going on behind closed doors for them to get those numbers and how much time they spend on it. So with engineering, it can be tough because we got to be billable. Nobody really wants to see you on LinkedIn if you have to, bill it to something, unless you're in sales. So I think that's why a lot of people kind of avoid it. But I think at least make one, have one. And if you go to an event, add the people that you meet. Like, that's bare minimum, but it's really not that hard if you're only doing that.
Yeah, and I would agree. In terms of, like, sometimes I'll create some posts and it'll have pretty much no interaction, and maybe it's a job vacancy, but then the phone will ring and it'll be someone who's ideal for the vacancy, and that's it. and that's all that's what I'm posting it for that particular post.
Right. But it brought you like someone calling about it or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's
So
hard to
even when you
know
think
what's happening.
exactly, so even when you think, I know, and I've contacted other companies, and they regularly kind of never really get much interaction, but what they're saying in terms of their expertise and how they can help myself is enough for me to pick up the phone and speak to them, because they are the experts in what they're the experts in.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. So you might not get those likes, but you're still getting people seeing it. And engineers are like the biggest, or geologists too, the biggest lurkers that are going to see your stuff but not interact because they just don't. But I've had people be like, "Oh, I see your stuff all the time. It's amazing." And I'm like, "You see my stuff. I never see you interacting with it, so I just figured you don't see it." But they do. And it doesn't mean they don't like it. It just means they don't always click that like button. And it's like this psychology behind it. So.
yeah, most people don't, because I'll have conversations and they'll say the same thing, like, "Oh, I see you on," and I'm like, why don't you interact with it then? But they're not there
Right.
for you, are they? That's
Hmm.
the thing.
Hmm. Yeah, and I like when I see people's posts, I try to do any sort of interaction on them just to like cheer them on and support them. But it's different because some of them I do just scroll right by. So it's hard to say what people are gonna like, what makes somebody like something versus them commenting or them just not saying anything at all. Like it's just you got to keep putting yourself out there, I think.
Just keep going. Just, I think it's the advice for
Hmm.
everything. Start, keep going, try and improve that, and that's
Yeah, at
about it.
least add the people you already know. That's already a network to start with. So.
Sure. So, what's your advice to students and early career engineers who feel unsure about their direction in the industry?
So this is just going to sum up kind of everything I've already said with try everything and also have a LinkedIn because while you're trying everything and you're meeting new people, you're adding a network, you're creating a network, and having that LinkedIn just gives you a place to keep all of that in one place. So if you are confused or not sure about what you want to do, um, it's not permanent. What you're doing is not permanent. You can always pivot to something else. You can always change to something else. And it's important to kind of try to pivot even where you're at now and maybe not give up on something completely, but just shift your environment a little bit to see if it helps. I think it's really important to stay introspective, to have mentors to look up to learn from, because a lot of people have made those mistakes so that you don't have to, so they can give you that direction and that advice. I think it's also really important to always um, be okay with asking for help and not having the answers, especially when you start out. Because if you're an engineer and you come from an engineering school, you feel like you should know, you feel like you should be able to do that. But a lot of what we do outside of school is just taught while we're on the job. It's something you learn while we do it. So just be patient and gentle with yourself, and don't think that anything is a permanent choice. Just know that you can grow, that you can evolve, that people will accept that, people will support you. Your parents, even if they don't want you to make a big career change, like who cares? I feel like life's too short to settle for things that don't bring you energy or joy. And work is work. Of course, it's going to be work. But if you're going somewhere for 8 hours at least a day for 40 hours a week, that's a lot of your life. So make sure that it's something that at least gives you some passion, because people don't realize that after once school's done, you're working the rest of your life. And that's how many years compared to the years that you were in school. It gets really monotonous pretty quick because now you have the same job for the rest of your life. It's not a 4 month internship here and there. It's the same thing day in, day out. And that's why it's so important to figure that out ahead of time on what gives you energy and what drains you. So that by the time you're 10 years in, you have way more of an indication of what that is than somebody who never explored that in the first place. So just don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to try something new. And don't be afraid to not be the smartest person in the room. I feel like I don't claim to be very smart, but I'm smart in my own way. I think it's important to realize that everybody has a spot at the table for their unique abilities and their unique selves. Um, and it's important to figure that out and to not be afraid to just be who you are.
Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Out of,
It's a lot.
out of the projects that you've worked on, whether it's dams, bridges, stabilization efforts, which one stands out as the most rewarding and memorable, and why?
So my most memorable project, I've worked, yeah, on a lot of different dams, bridges, hillsides. I think my biggest project that is the most memorable was the first drilling project I did with Stantec. My first time logging, we did helicopter drilling up in Oregon. And to even find out we had to do helicopter drilling, me and she was my boss's boss at the time, we had to hike up this huge hillside with basalt chunks and dead trees. And like, we didn't know how we were going to get down or up. And then, like, the darkness was rushing in. And I had just never really had that experience of like having to be with somebody that's like your boss's boss and having to like lead them down a hill and not be super freaked out. And like, I'm from Colorado, but I didn't hike till I was like 20. So, still kind of new to it. And I was just so out of my comfort zone there, that it really was kind of just eye opening for me to be so out of my comfort zone, just physically too. On top of not knowing anything about the geology, I was like, I don't hike like this. And now I'm trying to help, someone 20 years older than me try to come down the hill. Like, that was just a different kind of tough for me than like it being academically tough, which I was used to. So I think that really is what scratched my itch, or not scratch, it got me excited about geology. Because my boss's boss was like engineering geologist, so she knows a ton about discontinuity mapping, faults, all of that. So I really got to learn from her firsthand, just in the field, which was super cool to me to have that, because in school you don't get to see it applied firsthand to know why you're doing it. And she's super, super knowledgeable and probably the best teacher I've had, even though she's my boss. Like, she was able to teach me these methods that I had never understood before that finally made all this sense in my head once I could see it big picture. So I think that was probably just the most memorable project, because I was learning the most, and it was the first time I had logged. So of course it was horrible. But it was really exciting to get to fly in a helicopter, to have to like think about that. It's just a whole nother experience with safety too. Getting to learn from, yeah, I got to learn from Jennifer Van Pelt, who's like this logging queen guru. So it was like the coolest project to be set up on, because I got to learn from all of the best of just things that I had never gotten to see in person before. So I think that's really what gave me the bug of liking mapping and discontinuity mapping and fault mapping. And now I get to do that in my job now. It's not something that I'm not the expert on. I just need to understand it to be able to do my job. So it actually, like, I think that showed me where my passions lie. And it was hard to do any other project after that because you start with helicopter drilling, all the coolest parts of it, to just going to drill in Pueblo and stuff. Like, Pueblo here is like flat desert basically. So it's just a very stark difference from helicopter drilling in Oregon, where it's super green, super mountainous. Just that project is hard to beat if you compare it to any other investigations.
I bet it is downhill from there, I suppose, isn't it, in terms of your exposure?
Yeah, and I haven't done heli since, so I'm like still waiting.
What's a common misconception people have about geotechnical engineering, and how would you explain it to them?
I think the misconception is that they don't even really know what it is. So I think back when I tried to explain that to somebody versus what I do now, of like, I do more of the geological engineering, where it's like, oh, you drive by a a mountain and you see the barriers or the mesh. That's what we do. But geotech, it's hard because it's like people don't even know what that is. If you just say soil, it's like great, but what does that even mean? So for me, I think there's just a lot of misconception on just even understanding what it was. And the best way I could describe it, it's like, hey, you're in a building, think about what's underneath and how we need to know what's underneath to know if this building can sit here. Like that's the best way that I can describe it to somebody that doesn't know anything about it, because past that, it's not going to make much sense. It's just like, oh yeah, think about how a building moves up and down with clay. Like I think the more you get into the details, the more confusing it can be.
I
So,
always say, someone asks what the geotechnical is. I say the house that Jack built. Yeah, he built it on sand and it fell over. Yeah, well, if he had a
mhm,
geotechnical engineer, probably wouldn't have happened.
exactly.
That's it. And it's like, oh,
Hmm.
okay,
Well, and that's perfect. That's a simple explanation to be like, yeah, you want your building to stand up, then you need
yeah,
a geotech engineer.
that's it. That's it.
Mhm.
Thank you. So, having worked in both technical and business focused roles, how do you stay organized and effective across such different responsibilities, which is a little bit of what we spoke about earlier on?
Yeah, so it is really hard to do that. It's like, I don't think anybody should ever have a position that does all of those things. If you're doing business development and all the technical work, I was doing that for a little bit, and someone warned me I was going to be spread too thin, and I didn't believe them. And then by the end of it, I was definitely spread too thin, because if you don't manage expectations with having to balance all of those things, if you're being looked at as an engineer, where's your 80% billability? If you're looked at as a technician, why aren't you in the field every day? If you're looked at as a BD person, then why aren't you hitting your quota? Like it's stuff like that, that it's tough to do all of those things if you don't have the right manager, like understanding what you're doing and giving you the right metrics to follow and the right quotas to hit that's accurate for the time that you can spend on it. I think it's important to learn the technical side to be able to do the BD side, which I always want to do the technical side before I go and try to sell it. But if you're doing it all at the same time, it really like you have to have someone that can help manage the expectations of where you're putting your time. And
It's quite kind of taxing, isn't it? Because if you have the
mhm,
technical side, that is taxing as well. That is just tiring work. But
mhm.
then business development, that is tiring work. Because like say you're not quite door knocking, but you're not too far away from it, and it
Yeah,
takes
you're
up all this
socializing and it's taking
energy and
energy.
getting.
Hmm.
And if someone, sometimes people are occasionally not very nice about it, or
Hmm.
potentially, I think I've had one person swear at me and hang up. It's only ever happened once. But then the same company, they have a business development person, of course, because they need their clients, because we all do.
Hmm.
We're all the same. It's just different. We have different focus than our clients, and we all have business
Exactly.
development. So we don't need to tell each other to f off. There's just no
Yeah,
point, because
we're all
they'll
just
need. Well,
Yeah, that's the tough part though. It's like we're all trying to do business development and everyone's trying to sell. It's just figuring out the best way to do that. And for me, like I said before, it's kind of if I'm already doing the technical work, then why not just showcase that as a way to market and spread brand awareness? It's nice if you can do both of those things, but I just learned that if you have someone that can only do BD, that makes a world of difference versus trying to put somebody to handle all that on top of going out into the field and doing concrete testing. Cause like I was doing that, I'd come home and I'm tired. I don't want to go to a conference or a one-on-one meeting with a client because I've already been on site all day. So that was really my best way of doing it, was like, how do I just showcase what I'm doing right now? Even if I'm not going to the conferences or, meeting people one-on-one, at least they're seeing what I'm doing and they know who to call. So it's not the best way to do business development, but it's a way to do that if you're already having to do other things on top of it. And I think, especially in our world, people will trust the technical people before they just trust a salesman that's not from what we do.
that's it. I hear it's a saying: "Become the lighthouse, and not the tugboat." Because you want people ideally coming to you rather than you constantly hitting the phones or meetings and
Yeah.
everything
And
else.
psychologically, people like coming to you more than you coming to them. So if
Yeah,
it can be their idea, then they're way more likely to do it than you trying to make it your idea. So really, yeah, it's just putting yourself out there and knowing what to put out there and making sure it's not wrong, because people, engineers will always say if it's wrong or not, and they will not be afraid to say something like that. So
mhm.
yeah, just know your stuff and put it out there, I think is what I learned for business development. Works pretty well. But
Yeah, that's it. Except that you're not going to get every, you're probably going to have a numbers of how many conversations, how many potential demonstrations, or face-to-face
yeah, and
meetings,
even then
etc., etc.
it takes like 6 months to a year from
Yeah,
start to finish of that
yeah,
relationship. So for me, it's like I'm not gonna start a relationship and try to knock on the door and say, "Can you make a decision on what we're gonna be
yeah,
now?" It's more like, "Oh, nice to meet you. Maybe, we'll see if our paths line up. And if not, okay. If so, in 6 months, great. In a year, great." Like it always takes
yeah.
me probably 6 months at least to start seeing everything that I put into motion being reaped, I guess. So you have to be patient for sure.
You do. I would say I'd kind of describe it as it's almost like mostly failure. You spend a whole day, and if you get a kind of hit rate in the one of say 3 to 5%, it's not bad. Then you just have to make those calls, have those meetings, etc. So most of the time, if you were just doing a focused role of that, most of the time you're kind of failing each day. But
Yeah.
what you are getting through is enough for yourself and the company, and you don't need 50%. In fact, if you ever did win 50%, and it's like when companies put out lots of tenders, and then all of a sudden, we've just won more than we thought. Now we don't have enough staff, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's a
So yeah,
balance for
there's
sure.
only so many you
Yeah.
want to win, but it's a
Hmm.
hard gruel, to be honest. So what's next for you in your career? Do you have any big goals or areas that you'd like to explore further?
Yeah, so I'm trying to get my PE right now. Hopefully this next year I'll have it.
And can
That
you explain a little bit about the PE? So it's your engineer's license. What is it? PE.
Yeah, so like being chartered, it's like having 4 years experience, then take a test, then you get your license, and then that's when you can start stamping things. So here you have to take your EIT, which is another test, and then you pass that, you get your EIT or EI, and then you have to get 4 years experience with that under an engineer, and then you can take the PE test. And then once you take that and pass it, you can get your license if you have that 4 years experience. So I'm like 5, 6 years out now. A couple times I've almost just forsaked taking it and not done it because I didn't want to do engineering. But now that I have the experience and the time put in, I'm like, why not? Like, I kind of, I have nothing to lose at this point by getting it. So I'm just
How
getting
does
it more.
the idea sound to you of kind of rubber stamping projects and signing it off like, yep, that's safe?
Doesn't get me excited or anything, but I would do it. Like right now, we work with engineers that stamp for us and do the designing for us. So um, I I would be scared to do it. I would do it, but I'm hoping that I can get more experience in my role now before I actually start, stamping things once I get my PE. So I think it's actually a good timing for me to not have it yet so that, no, there's no, I'm not having to stamp things that are just like I probably shouldn't be, because I don't have that experience yet. But I think where I'm at now, where I am getting that experience, and then I can get my PE and then eventually, stamp, or at least having that helps if we have to go get it a design from someone else. I at least can understand, where it's coming from. And that's why I like my position now, is because I get to work with engineers and the exact same people that I used to be. And now I'm just on the other side where we're actually building it. But um, after I get my PE, I'm just hoping to, stay where I'm at and grow and maybe do more management of some sort. But right now, our team is pretty small. So just working on becoming an expert and getting my PE, seeing as much as I can out in the field, getting, more involved in organizations like Women in Mining. What else? Yeah, just things like that. That's really what I'm focused on in the next few years for my career, because I feel like I'm finally at a place where I like where I'm at and I enjoy what I'm doing and I am passionate and it gives me life to do it. So it's hard for me to think past, these next few years, what that looks like, but I'm hoping I'm, still at the same place, maybe technical services manager or something. But right now, mainly working on getting my PE because that's the hardest thing. So
That's the hardest thing. So you mentioned women
mhm.
in, sorry, not women in engineering, women in mining.
Mhm.
Do you want to just give us a quick overview of that, and perhaps somewhere where people can connect with yourself or the actual organization directly?
So Women in Mining is a really big organization. They have different chapters across the US, but they have a Denver chapter, which is what I'm getting more involved in. And right now, I'm not super involved. I'm trying to get a little bit more, but I'm taking like an open pit mining design course. So that on top of like trying to go to like the gala and different events that they have. They had a networking event at the School of Mines the other month. They're on LinkedIn though. They're on Instagram. You just have to look up like Women in Mining, and then they have the chapters that are distinct to each state, or they'll have like the national chapter. So LinkedIn is probably the best place to find them there. And they post a good amount. So I'm hoping to get more involved with their PR team this next year, but just haven't spent much time yet. So that's really, I think, forefront on my mind and my list this year or this next year, is to get more involved and actually be on committees, because so far I've joined organizations, but I haven't really been on any committees because I don't know where my passion lies. But I'd say PR and social media and just that side of things is probably where my passion lies. So you'll see more from me on Women in Mining as I get more involved.
Excellent. Okay, okay. Well, that pretty much takes us to the end of the show. So, lastly, if you can let listeners know how they can connect with yourself on LinkedIn or any other social media channels that you have.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Hannah Thomas. I have a GeoVert like background as a cover photo. My picture looks like me, so should be able to figure that out. But any other social medias, I wouldn't follow me on because I don't
No,
post work.
that
No,
different
so
side.
be a different side. If you
Different
want to be my friend, maybe one day you'll see that side. Yeah, but
side.
it's something I keep private for now. And then LinkedIn, I'm like, most
Yeah,
of the time it's where I spend my time anyways, and I'm way more
yeah, me
likely
too.
to respond on there even over text. So
Hmm.
feel free, anyone can connect with me or follow me. Super happy to,
Sure.
learn from new
Well,
people,
I'll
meet
put a
new
link
people.
to your LinkedIn account on the show notes anyway. But Hannah, thank you very much for coming on today and
Yeah,
spending your time,
yeah,
and yeah, giving you advice and telling us a bit about your background and your story. Thanks very much
yeah.
for
Thank
coming
you.
on.
I've been a big fan of your podcast, and I can't wait to share it with my network because I think it's
Excellent,
super, super cool to hear from your perspective.
brilliant. Well, thanks very much for your time.
Sweet. Thank you.